All right, joining us right here on ET now is somebody who's extremely clued in as far as the CBI, the war within is concerned. He's also one of the key petitioners on the Rafale issue in the Supreme Court. And joining us on the show right here is India's former finance minister and former minister for external affairs, Mr. Yashwant Sinha, joins us. Thank you very much, Mr. Sinha, for being with us. And it's only fair that I talk to you about the big development of the day before I come back to really the core issues, the basic issues of CBI. And one of the big developments of the day is that the Supreme Court has not reinstated Mr. Alok Verma. It has said there will be a time-bound inquiry that has to be done in 2 weeks. Whatever the court has done, will this help uphold the institutional integrity of an institution whose credibility and reputation has taken a big knock?
You know, a little while ago you were talking about war in the CBI. I think what the Supreme Court has done is it has enforced a ceasefire. The Supreme Court order is an interim order. They'll hear the case again on the 12th of November. For the time being, it is an interim order, so we must understand the nature of the order that the Supreme Court has passed. Interim. The second is they had to restore some peace in the CBI so that the whole institution does not collapse. They have ordered an inquiry by the CVC to be under the supervision of a retired Supreme Court Judge, Justice Patnaik, and they have rejected the government's plea to give them 3 weeks. They have limited it to 2 weeks so that when they hear the case on the 12th of November, the report of the inquiry will be with the Supreme Court. So this is a very important part. The third is that they have limited the jurisdiction of the interim director of the CBI and told him to discharge only the administrative functions. But very importantly, they have said that he will not take any policy or major decision. So, which means that all the transfers, etc., which have been done will also be looked at by the Supreme Court in the meanwhile. Now, one way of looking at it will be that they have not restored Alok Verma's to the CBI as CBI Director. Precisely. But the other way of looking at it is that they have not approved the action of the government also. And they have intervened effectively. They have established peace for the time being, and they'll finally hear the case in November.
Mr. Sinha, if I may quickly quote the finance minister who's really leading the government's defense and this entire coverage on this matter. And he says that the Supreme Court has further strengthened the fairness criteria by fixing a time-bound time limit. And in order to ensure the highest standards of fairness and maintained even in the inquiry, they've appointed a veteran Supreme Court judge. Are you somebody who believes that the Supreme Court has done this, or do you actually believe the other argument, which says that the fact that the Supreme Court wants a retired judge to supervise this probe raises the question that the court doesn't have complete faith in the CVC to do so fairly?
Well, it's clearly a vote of no confidence in the CVC because, he is the highest vigilance officer of the government who has the right of the authority of superintendence over the CBI, and his inquiry is going to be supervised and monitored by a retired Supreme Court judge. So what does it mean? It means that the CVC has lost the kind of confidence that that office inspired, and that's why the court was compelled to make an order of this kind. And I have no doubt in my mind that the very dirty politics which has been played around in CBI, the CVC unfortunately was a party to it. Otherwise, they would have disposed of. I mean, this is a few months old complaint. They should have dispose it off. And subsequent statements by the CVC shows that it is clearly biased against Alok Verma, and somehow is become a handmaid of the government. So this order that a Supreme Court judge will supervise is a very, very important element of the Supreme Court's order.
But Mr. Sinha, one of the things that the opposition is claiming victory on is that the interim CBI director cannot take policy decisions. He just has to keep the CBI running. I'm just curious to understand, what is a policy decision in CBI? Does this refer to transfer and appointments, you know, or does this really pertain to ongoing cases? What is, quote unquote, a policy decision by a CBI governor?
Two things, you know, it's not merely policy decision. The other term which has been used by the Supreme Court in its order is major decision. He will not take a policy decision, he will also not take a major decision. Now, administrative decisions like transferring investigating officers to Andaman, for instance, is a major decision. And that's the reason why Supreme Court has asked for the information in a sealed cover. Policy decision will be with regard to any major structural change in the CBI's functioning, you know, allocation of various responsibilities, etc. So he has been prevented from doing all that, and that, I will say, is a measure of lack of confidence expressed by the Supreme Court in the interim director of CBI. He will only, as the court order says, he'll only ensure that the CBI remains functional, nothing more than that.
Okay. Mr. Sinha, I'll come to the operative part, and this is a part that concerns you and your petition, and also something that you had met Mr. Verma over along with Mr. Shauri and Mr. Bhushan, and that is Rafale. And obviously from the Congress party's point of view and a host of other opposition parties, the attempt is to bring Rafale into this whole controversy by stating that Mr. Verma was actually going to move on Rafale. While I don't want to dispute what you're saying, but there is no concrete proof that suggests that this indeed was going to happen, especially when the CBI has now come on record and said that there was no such development.
I can't claim any knowledge of the internal functioning of the CBI director or the CBI generally on the complaint that we had filed. You know, I was not in Delhi on that day, so therefore, while I had signed the complaint petition, I could not accompany my colleagues like Arun Shauri and Prashant Bhushan to the CBI director's office. But be that as it may, there is no doubt in my mind that something must have happened for this midnight operation. I mean, the very unusual manner in which this entire thing was implemented raises very serious doubts. I mean, what was the urgency to remove him from his functions at 2 o'clock in the morning, or whenever it happened, 1 o'clock in the morning? And the interim director goes to the CBI office under the protection of Delhi police. I mean, all these are unprecedented developments in our polity, something that we have not seen in the whole history of independent India. So I have no doubt that the complaint petition that the three of us had filed, you know, maybe something or the other was happening, and therefore it had to be done at midnight or past midnight on that day. Otherwise, what was the urgency? They could have easily waited until the next morning.
Okay, okay. Mr. Sinha, though, I will ask you this question. While the three of you are attempting to get a probe done in Rafale, you've moved the Supreme Court, the Congress party is taking to the streets. They did this massive protest outside the CBI. Some opposition parties like the TMC and the left joined them. But the opposition is largely divided and can't seem to make up its mind as far as either the CBI, the midnight coup and all that's happening at the CBI is concerned, or even on the Rafale scam. scam. You've had somebody like Sharad Pawar till yesterday say there is no scam there. So there doesn't seem to be a common thread. Rafale or CBI doesn't seem to be this common thread that's binding voices of opposition.
Well, let me correct you by saying that Sharad Pawar has retracted from the statement that he had made. In any case, on the question on the issue of Rafale, I don't think there is any party in the opposition which is today supporting the government's stand. Everyone is clearly of the view that something fishy has taken place in the Rafale deal, and the government is doing all within its powers to ensure that an investigation or an inquiry does not take place. And therefore, they are acting so stubbornly. They are throwing the baby with the bathwater only in order to prevent Rafale from blowing up in their face.
Do you believe Rafale or CBI and what's happening here is going to be an election issue in Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh, these three states that are going to go into elections, and very crucial elections, very high-stake battles there? Because reports on the ground seem to suggest that states don't really care about what's happening with either Rafale or the CBI. What's your own sense, sir?
My take on this is very simple. Most people in the rural areas have not heard about Rafale. It has not gone to the masses in the sense in which Bofors managed to get into the consciousness of the masses. Rafale is not there yet. But the way the government is behaving and the panic which you see in the powers that be shows that Rafale has the potential to become a major election issue, not only in these state elections, but also in the subsequent Lok Sabha elections. And I think the opposition parties will do well to get their act together on this issue.
Two last questions before I let you go, and one of them, of course, I want to put the focus back on CBI and this unprecedented controversy and muck that CBI, India's premier investigative agency, finds itself into. What will this mean for ongoing cases and some very high-profile, high-stake political cases being probed by the agency? What will it mean for cases like those, and what does it also mean for cases where people have fled the country, people like Vijay Mallya, who are perhaps going to turn around and tell courts and wherever they are residing now that this is the state of India's premier investigative agency? Why should I be bearing the burden of this probe at all? I mean, what happens to these cases? Is that a risk we run?
Well, you're absolutely right. When an agency like the CBI is discredited in this manner, it was described as a caged parrot at one time. You know, I think it is now a dead parrot in that cage, and it has dented CBI's credibility like never before. So therefore, all the cases which have been investigated by CBI, all the cases which are under investigation by the CBI will carry this this burden. But at the same time, I'd like to assure you that there are, I personally am aware of very honest officers in the CBI at various ranks which are doing their duty, and the whole organization need not be damned only because a few of the officers have indulged in this unseemly act. But the situation in the CBI is pretty bad. The sooner we restore its credibility, the better it will be. Now the matter is before the Supreme Court, and I think over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think this whole thing should be settled.
Is 2018 turning out to be a lot like 2013, circa 2013, when Mr. Manmohan Singh was in office, and it was almost a new battle that UPA 2 was fighting every single day? Firefighting seems to be defining what the government is doing right now on most issues, and that's exactly what UPA 2 did in its last year in office. Am I drawing a right parallel here, or am I hyperventilating?
No, no, you are quite right in drawing that parallel. You know, every government in its last year faces many challenges. This government is definitely facing unprecedented challenges. For instance, in the economic field, in the financial sector, the payment system has collapsed. There is a shortage of funds in the market, and you are seeing what is happening to the stock market and to the exchange market. That is happening separately in its own way. But all these things are they go to show that the government is in a panic mode. The government does not know how to deal with a situation, developing situation. They are acting out of panic, and they are acting out of fear, and they are making mistakes. I only hope that their mistakes will not do permanent damage to the polity of the country, and that we'll get out of this mess as soon as possible through the intervention of the court and through the intervention of the people when the elections come.
Indeed. And on that note, Mr. Yashwant Sinha, we thank you very, very much for taking time out and talking to us in what is perhaps an unprecedented watershed moment as far as our institutions are concerned. Now it's up to the Supreme Court to be taking a final call on this. But thank you very much, sir, for speaking to us.